My wife was diagnosed.
We're going to leave this now. A reminder, you can watch all of our Washington Journal programs online at cspan.org. Take you live to remarks by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She'll be speaking here at the Economic Club of Washington, D.C. in just a moment. Watching live coverage on C-SPAN 2.
And they went back there, and then in the course of 6 years, they had 5 children together. Yes, very busy. 4 girls and 1 boy. And Nancy did a terrific job with her husband, raising the children, very attentive to them. They all turned out terrifically. And eventually she got involved in government affairs a little bit. One of her neighbors was the mayor of San Francisco, Joseph Alioto, and he said to her, why don't you get on the library board? I'd like to have you be involved in a more formal way with some of the things you're doing. And she said, no, I don't want to get involved in any formal government positions. I'm just happy with what I'm doing as a volunteer. But ultimately, she went on that board, and ultimately she got more involved in civic affairs, and ultimately she got involved in the Democratic Party in California and became the chair of the northern section of the California Democratic Party, and later became the chair of the entire California Democratic Party. She was very close to her Congresswoman, Sally Burton, who had replaced her husband, Phil Burton, as a member of Congress when he passed away. And then Sally Burton, as she was on her deathbed, honestly, said to Nancy Pelosi, I'd like you to succeed me. And Nancy had no interest, she said, in running for Congress, but ultimately she was persuaded to do so by Sally Burton. So she ran a special election in 1987, and she won. I think there were 12 others running at the time, but she won fairly overwhelmingly and became a member of the House of Representatives, so now more than 30 years ago. She rose up in that position, and in 2002 was asked to be the House Minority Whip, and she's seated in that position. And then in 2003, she became the House Minority Leader and served in that position for a number of years. And then in 2007, became the first woman in our country's history to serve as Speaker of the House of Representatives. She served in that position for 4 years. When the Democrats lost control of the House, she retained her position as a House Minority Leader and served in that position for 8 years. And then, as we know, in the last elections in November, the House went back Democratic Party control, and she was elected again as Speaker, and now the 52nd Speaker of the House of Representatives in our country. So it's my honor to introduce and to ask Nancy Pelosi to please come up here. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that rundown.
Thank you. Here. Okay. So,
thank you, David.
For you, not for me.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, there's nothing you can say that'll live up to this applause. So
I can leave now.
So you have said that being the mother of 5 and the grandmother of 9 has been helpful to you in government service and giving you kind of experience. Is it more helpful in dealing with your caucus or dealing with the White House?
Why I say that is because I want to say to all moms out there, place a gold star on that experience that you have, whether you're dealing, whatever, shall we say, opportunities you are faced with. It's about managing time and personalities and diplomacy and quartermaster and logistics and all the rest. It's a multitasking wonder, and I just congratulate all moms and dads for what they do. But so it's not about managing people because of my experience with children. It's more about managing time.
Okay. So tell us, what was it when you were elected Speaker, the first woman to be Speaker, and then you recaptured the speakership after 8 years as a minority leader? How do you compare the relative pleasure of being the first Speaker who's a woman to capturing it again and being the first Speaker in 60 years to recapture the speakership? How do you compare the relative joy and pleasure of that?
Well, before I answer that question, and I thank you for it, let me thank you, David, for your leadership in so many ways. because all of us who are involved in the public arena one way or another have a deep patriotism and love of our country. And we thank you for many things, but including memorializing so much of our country's heritage and recognizing.
Thank you. So,
whether it is in words and well, even from the Magna Carta, but the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, our national monuments and the rest, as a tribute to the great vision of our founders, which is something that inspires us every day. Thank you for making that visibility so strong. And I thank the Economic Club of Washington, Mary Brady, for the hospitality today to be here. Thank you, Mary. I think it's important on International Women's Day to acknowledge the leadership of all women. Mary, President McGuire from Trinity College, my alma mater, which I totally love. So the first time, I have to say, when I was running for leadership in the Congress or for Speaker, the last thing I could ever say to someone is, you should vote for me because we should have a woman. You just had to prove that you would do the best job. But when it turned out that I became the Speaker, it was quite an overwhelming feeling that we had broken a marble ceiling in our country. I always thought the American people, David, were much more ready for an American president than the Congress of the United States was ready for a woman Speaker. I like to tell the story of the first meeting that I ever went to as a leader, not yet Speaker, but leader with President Bush as president. And when I went was going to the White House for my first meeting as a leader of my caucus, and I didn't feel apprehensive about it because I'd been to the White House many times as an appropriator, as a member of the Intelligence Committee. Those are the two places I was forged in Congress. And so I just went. But as we went into the meeting and the door closed behind me, I realized that it was like unlike any meeting I had ever been to before. In fact, it was unlike any meeting any woman had been to before in the White House, because there was a small meeting, the president, the leadership of the House and Senate, Democratic and Republican. But I was going in there not as an appointment of the president with my power and presence derived from a person, but actually from the power of my caucus. So when I sat there, and I tell you this story because it's International Women's Day yet. So as I sat there, and President Bush, ever gracious, welcoming, all of a sudden I was squeezed in on my chair. It was so crowded on my chair, I could barely acknowledge what he was saying. I was so distracted with what was happening. And I realized that sitting there on that seat with me were Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Sojourner Truth, Alice Paul, you name it. They were all there, right on that chair. And I could hear them say, "At last, we have a seat at the table." And then they were gone. And my first thought was, we want more. We want more. So that's my International Women's Day story.
So, well, since you've been a leader in the House, you've dealt with three presidents. President Bush, President Obama, and President Trump. So could you compare their relative different styles? How are they different?
Well, they aren't relative, but I thank you for the question. I think it's an important one from a historical standpoint. Here's the thing. First of all, I completely and entirely respect the office of the President of the United States. And I respect the people who voted to elect a President of the United States. So it's with complete respect that I encounter whoever the President is. I always make it my own practice not to suggest to any president, Democratic or Republican, anything that is not in his interest. So I go in with my agenda and say, you should do this. No, this is in the public's interest, the national interest. President Trump was a governor of, President Bush was the governor of Texas. President Obama was a state senator and a United States senator. So they have brought to their office some level of experience in government and some level of knowledge of issues of the day. So it was a little bit easier, if you use the word relative, to relate and speak shorthand about the issues that we had ahead. We worked very closely with President Bush, even though I disagreed with him mightily on the war in Iraq, but that did not prevent us from working together to pass the biggest energy bill in the history of our country, passing legislation related to taxes that was refundable, that helped poor children, poor families in our country, PEPFAR, all kinds of issues that we worked together with. And he would send people and say, whether it was Secretary Paulson or his advisors on energy, whatever it was, these people have my confidence, but you call me if you have some. So we had a good working relationship. President Obama, of course, as a Democratic president, we had a very special relationship then, but you still, even though it's your own party, have your differences of approach or degree or timing and whatever.
President Trump?
I pray for our country every day. I always have. But I do think that, that there's something to be said for experience, knowledge, judgment, and surrounding yourself with people who know. I always say to people when they say they want to run for office, and I'll just apply it to them, what is your vision for our country? What is your why? Why should we be attracted to what you have to say? What do you know about your subject, your focus? If it's climate, if it's economic vitality, if it's education, if it's whatever the subject, what do you know about your specialties so that your judgment can be trusted in one arena and perhaps transferred to another? What is your vision? What is your knowledge and judgment? What is your strategic thinking about issues? How to get something done? And how do you draw people into your orbit so that you are a leader and can advance in that? So when you make a judgment about a candidate, of course, that applies to a president as well. And I do think that there's something to be said for whatever your vision is, or whatever your connection is to the public, that in between, your judgment is guided by evidence, data, facts, truth, knowledge, and that is a place where we have some work to be done.
Well, you haven't agreed with President Trump on that many things, and very often, sometimes people don't agree with him. He tweets about them, things that they, calls them a name or something. He has a, interesting name for them. He has not tweeted anything really negative about you and hasn't given you any name. Do you feel left out by not having a name? And how do you account for the fact that, although you oppose him on many things, he seems to be very, very civil to you?
Well, we have a courteous relationship. As I say, I respect the office that he holds, the fact that the public, he is the President of the United States. But let me just say this about, I do think that there's some areas that we can work together, and perhaps that's why we still have a good, shall we say, courteous relationship. I think in our election of this year, not to go into the political part, but the policy part, our agenda was for the people, harkening back to our founders and Abraham Lincoln, etc. For the people. Lowering the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs, increasing paychecks by building the infrastructure of America. And our third point was H.R. 1, cleaner government, which we passed on the floor of the House today, and I couldn't be prouder. I'll get back to that in a moment. But the first two policy items, lowering the cost of prescription drugs and building the infrastructure of America, are two areas where I've had conversations with the President, and we've had some interactions between the administration and the legislative branch and our outside groups who are interested in this to have some results for the American people in that regard. So keeping the the rapport, courteous, keeping it respectful. I think on those two areas, which are our two priorities, the president has assured me that that is something that he wants to do. Assured that's the word I would use, yeah.
You had a well-publicized meeting with the president right before the government shutdown with Chuck Schumer, and the president said he would take the blame if there was a government shutdown. Were you surprised?
Proudly.
Were you surprised that later on that wasn't the case? And did you ever think of the people come to you and say, let's end the government shutdown? Or did you ever have any doubt that this was going to work out in the way that you thought it should work out?
A shutdown of government should never happen, especially one that happens for a period of time. 800,000 people did not get paychecks, whether they came to work or not. They did not get paychecks. That has a tremendous impact on those individual families, on the communities, the economy of the communities in which they live, on our economy writ large. It also deprives the American people of the services rendered by our public sector. So it was wrong in every respect. So to your point of, did I think it was going to end up that we would open up government by the president signing the bill that we sent him? Yes. And you know why? Because of public sentiment. Abraham Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, almost nothing. And the public sentiment was there to the stories of the families, the concerns of people who needed the services, whether it's civil aviation or whatever it happened to be. The public sentiment. And that is what gives me the most hope in government today, because it's a different place than when I first came to Congress in terms of social media and the rest, and in real time, how information, real or slanted, gets out there. So the fact is that I had confidence that public sentiment would reach the Senate of the United States, and that would make the difference to the president.
The dispute, to some extent, was over the funding of the wall. You and the Democrats were against it. The president and many of the Republicans wanted it. What is the reason the Democrats do not want to fund the wall? And ultimately, the bill did fund some of it. So what is the basic reason the Democrats don't like the president's proposal?
Well, what the president proposed, we're not talking about funding the wall. We're talking about funding a campaign applause line. There was nothing serious, scientific, evidence-based that a wall was what was going to be the best way to secure our borders. We all are there to secure our borders. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, the American people, our country, and we honor that. But just because the president said in a speech that he was going to have a wall and Mexico was going to pay for it, he seems to forget that part of it. But even if they did, a wall is not what is needed there. And so we said, we'll have the resources to do, I mean, more on subject you may ever want to know, but most of the trade, immigration, tourism, and the rest, and commercial aspects are huge in terms between Mexico and the United States, or within this hemisphere, come through the ports of entry. So we're saying, okay, if that's where 90% of it is coming, let us build the infrastructure of the ports of entry. If time is an important factor, and it always is, the most limited commodity of all, then let's have the technology that can scan, non-intrusively scan trucks, cars, whatever coming through, so that we can detect drugs, guns, other contraband. These people coming into our country need some respect in terms of food, clothing, medicine, et cetera. Let's have that. Let's have more judges to expedite the procedure and the rest of that. And that's what our bill did. House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans. And it said if there are places where there is a physical barrier is helpful, then you have $1.75 million to do all of the above. Now, you realize the president says, oh, we have 600 miles of this or that. 300 miles of it are what we call Normandy fences. Do you know what a Normandy fence is? It's like this. So it just keeps cars from coming through. That's not a wall, but the president is describing it as, well, we already have 600 miles. So the 1.75 was what we offered him last year, what he didn't accept, what he signed this year. And so I do think that from a standpoint of a sea to shining sea, big tall wall, impenetrable, is not the way we relate to other countries, other people. And if you want me to, I'll start talking about Ronald Reagan and what he thinks about walls and immigrants.
Let me ask you, though, today, can you assure the American people that it's unlikely we'll have another shutdown in the near term? You think that both sides have recognized it's not a good idea, or you think it's possible we could have one again?
Well, we have never thought it was a good idea. And we had like a weekend shutdown just as a...
Well, do you have a sense that the Republicans don't want to support a shutdown again?
Public sentiment is everything. And by the way, this was a 25% shutdown. It was terrible, but it was not only, it was limited to 25%. If it were 100% shutdown, as the Republicans instituted in 2013, that has even a bigger impact on the economy and the rest. And if you want to talk about that, right, I'll go to there.
Well, yesterday, the House of Representatives passed a resolution in which it basically said they were against anybody that hates anybody, I guess, more or less. It was an anti-hate resolution, but it was watered down in the view of some people, and it wasn't as much of an anti-Semitic resolution in terms of chastising somebody for something she had said. Are you happy with the resolution, and was it difficult negotiating that resolution that ultimately passed?
Well, I appreciate that question. Thank you. I don't think it watered down the anti-Semitic language at all. I think it strengthened it. And it isn't about anybody who hates anybody. It's about people who act upon their hatred. And that is what we have no place for against anyone in our country. And it is part of our values that we convey to the rest of the world. A week and a half or so ago, I took a big delegation to Munich for the Munich Security Conference, and then we went to Brussels to meet with the NATO and EU and those elements of our transatlantic relationship. And with the Prime Minister of Belgium, et cetera, in every meeting that we had, whether it was with the finance minister, the security, defense ministers, or the foreign minister, every meeting that we had, we talked about fighting anti-Semitism in our countries because it has been rearing its head. So this is something that we have been as part of who we are. The incident that happened with, I don't think our colleague is anti-Semitic. I think she has a different experience in the use of words, doesn't understand that some of them are fraught with meaning that she didn't realize, but nonetheless that we had to address. And so the question was, do you have one amendment that just talks about anti-Semitism, resolution, or one that addresses white supremacy, so many of the Islamophobia, all the rest of it. And so we thought it would just be appropriate to have it as one, but it has by no means any intention nor any impact or any effect in reducing the fight against anti-Semitism, not only in our own country, but it rears its head other places, and those other elements as well.
So in the old days, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, freshman members of Congress were generally thought to kind of be quiet for a few terms. They weren't supposed to say very much. That seems to have changed. And is it harder for you to kind of convince your senior members that the junior members need to have more time to express themselves? And is it difficult to manage the caucus when you have freshman members who get so much attention? Is that a problem?
No, it's a joy. It's an invigoration. It's what our founders intended. Elections every 2 years. Okay. Every 2 years. And I have to say this because I'm really proud of this. On International Women's Day, that in the Congress of the United States, this Congress, we have over 100 women members of Congress serving at the same time. Over 100 women.
And you were first...
We have 91 on our side, 15 on the other side, but we made a decision. Hopefully they will too. That's just, I'm talking about the House. Now, in the same Congress, next year, but in the same Congress, we will be observing the 100th anniversary of women having the right to vote. So this is, it's a very big stepping stone. And again, with all due respect to everyone who has served, our caucus is over 60% women, people of color, LGBTQ. Over 60% of our caucus. That's remarkable, right, Bart Gordon? What's different from when you were there? And that diversity is our strength. And I say to the members, as we, shall we say, channel our exuberances, our diversity is our strength, but our unity is our power.
So, in other words, when you have a freshman member of Congress who has a lot of Twitter followers and so forth, and they get a lot of attention, that doesn't bother you. Is that what you're saying?
No, actually, I think it's really important, especially for women and newcomers to the Congress, to know this is not a zero-sum game. Somebody else's progress or success in the public arena is a plus for all of us. It isn't a zero-sum game, but if you have this, then that subtracts from something else. Okay. So again, I thrive on the diversity. And just think of this. Maybe you weren't even born yet, but when the Watergate babies came, and that was a big deal, right?
74.
It was even before you were in the Carter administration.
Right. You're right.
When they came, just barely.
Right.
Just barely. When they came, they had one of the biggest, most historic classes to make an impact on the Congress of the United States. Chris, not one of them got a gavel in the first year. 18 of our freshmen are chairs of subcommittees and wield a gavel. 18 of our freshmen. And that says something about your question. Our more senior members welcome, they vie for them to come onto the committees because of the knowledge and experience that they bring.
Now, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, Congressman Nadler from New York, has recently issued a request for information from 81 members of the Trump administration. It has not subpoenaed yet, but requested. Are you supportive of that? And does he clear that kind of thing with you, where he does what he wants to do? And are you thinking that this could ultimately lead to some kind of impeachment effort, or is no interest on the part of the Democrats to have an impeachment process?
I support, of course, what our chairman does. We have an array of chairmen. I'm sure you saw Elijah Cummings' hearings last week, and wasn't he just fabulous? And the members of the committee, Adam Schiff, his are behind closed doors, but very effective leader on this. Others, Maxine Waters on the money side, Richie Neal on some of the other pieces of it, Elliot Engel on foreign affairs. We have an array of chairmen who take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, Jerry Nadler included, which says that in the text, part of it is the oversight of the executive branch. In their wisdom, our founders had 3 branches of government, co-equal, separation of power, a check and balance on each other. So for our chair people not to have oversight over another branch of government, in this case the executive branch, they would be delinquent in their duties and the oath of office they take. So we're not in a scattershot move. This is strategic. They don't come to me. No, they have their own. They have their own authority and strength. The purpose of their committees tied to their oath of office.
Okay. And today, there's been effort by some members of the House Ways and Means Committee and other members of your caucus to get the president's tax returns. Is that something you think is an appropriate thing to do?
Do I think it's appropriate? I think it's appropriate for the president of any candidate for president of the United States, nominee of the party, to put forth their tax returns. Everyone has done it since this became an issue with Gerald Ford. Not an issue with him, but starting with Gerald Ford, because it was an issue with Richard Nixon, President Nixon. But no, there shouldn't even have to be an extraordinary measure to ask the president to do what is appropriate to do. There are some measures that people have out there that says that anybody who wants to run for office should put forth that, you know, if you're the nominee of the party, that you should put your tax returns forward. I don't know what form Chairperson Richie Neal, and he's a fabulous, fabulous chair of the Ways and Means Committee. I don't know what form that will take. The committee will make its judgment based on ironclad constitutionality about how we go forward.
In the tax world, there was a tax cut in the first year of President Trump's administration that the Democrats opposed. Now that you're in control of the House, are you going to try to reverse that or do anything to pass any tax legislation this Congress?
Well, the Ways and Means Committee will review what we do about taxes in a larger sense. I have so many people come to us, whether it's institutions of higher learning, whether it's other philanthropic organizations, to say, if we could only just fix this, we can only just fix this, we can only just fix this. And we're saying, you know, we really just have to look at the whole tax bill and see what the decisions will be made as we go forward. It's important to note this, however. This tax bill was a tax scam of the highest magnitude. Today in the Congress of the United States, we passed H.R. 1 to remove obstacles of participation to people, citizens who are qualified to vote so that they can vote. It had many other empowerments for grassroots and small donors and the rest, removing the power of dark, special interest money in politics, and restoring confidence of the public in the public sector, that we are there to do the job, to get it done for them without undue influence from dark, special interest money. H.R. 1. The Republicans' H.R. 1, if I just be allowed a moment of differentiation, the Republicans' H.R. 1 was to pass a tax scam to get 83% of the benefits to the top 1% in our country, increasing the deficit with interest to about $2 trillion, the national debt to $2 trillion. What happened to the deficit hawks? They were becoming endangered species on the Republican side. Now they've become extinct. So this has to be revisited, not just because of the unfairness of it, but also the impact that it has on the budget. And what budget it means in terms of meeting the needs of the American people, whether it's investing in education, building an economy for the jobs for the 21st century, with innovation and allaying fears of globalization and innovation, what it means to America's workers. We have important work to do, and we can do it in a bipartisan way. But it's harder to do if you subtract $2 trillion to give a tax cut to the highest end. Could we have worked together to say what is an appropriate lowering of the corporate rate and what's the impact on the economy and this or that? But no, speed of light, dark of night, boom, pass a bill with no hearings, so the ramifications were not well known to the American people. Instead, as I say, our H.R. 1 is about empowering the people, and part of that is to have a Congress that is transparent and open, one that strives for bipartisanship, where we can find our common ground where we can, stand our ground where we can, and be completely imbued with the spirit of our founders, e pluribus unum, from many one. So no matter what our differences are, philosophically, geographically, in any way, whatever our differences are, as we have our debates, that we remember we are one. And that's what we have to keep coming back to. So to your question about the tax, we'll just have to sit down and take a look at it and what it means to keeping America number one in every possible way, and striving to end what's one of our overarching issues, striving to end the enormous and growing disparity of income in our country, which is not, it's not good for our families, it's not good for our economy.
What is it like to get along with the Senate side? The Senate side is controlled by the Republicans. Can you just call Mitch McConnell and say, let's have coffee and talk about where things are going, or it doesn't work quite that way?
I don't drink that much coffee.
Well, let's sit down and have some chocolate, let's say, or something like that. But I mean, is there a regular conversation going on with the Republicans in the Senate, or how does that work?
Well, David just gave me a box of chocolate as a welcoming gift. So I said to him, my kids and I made and my husband Paul, we just made an agreement the other day. If somebody gives you a box of chocolate, as an act of sincerity, you open it and start eating the chocolate. Otherwise, they think you're going to re-gift it. So since you mentioned chocolate, I just couldn't resist. It's one of my passions. I have a good rapport with Leader McConnell because we were both appropriators. I said earlier, appropriations and intelligence were two of the committees I was forged on when I had absolutely no intention of running for Congress, much less running for leadership. But I was forged in those committees, which in those days were very much bipartisan committees. And I do say, left to their own devices, the appropriators can come to a solution, and they did in this bill that the president recently signed. So Mitch and I are appropriators, and we have that history, so we can get along, even though we have our major differences.
In recent years, you have been vilified by the Republicans and people on the right, and I think in the most recent campaign, 132,000 ads were run against you just using your name. So does this elevate you in the... I mean, has this been personally difficult for you to be so vilified, or you actually take pride in the fact that they recognize you're very powerful?
My goddaughter, Katie Meyer, I don't know if she came, she told me she was coming, Katie Peterson. Hi, Katie. Katie sent me something on my phone that I read this morning, and it said, she sent it after the election, but it said, your power is the reason your opponents come after you, or something like that. I do believe, and this is what I say, because I have set an example to other women, so not to be too shy about things and assert yourself and take credit and the rest of that. But here's the thing. If I were not effective, they wouldn't be doing these ads. If they didn't have... I mean, they fear me because I am a master legislator. I just know how to do it because that's what I was doing. I wasn't running for leadership, I was legislating. But I have a following in the country that supports me at the grassroots level and across the board, and so they have to take me down. So I have to show other women, we're in the arena. You're in the arena. Once you get in that arena, you got to be prepared to take a punch. I'd be prepared to throw a punch too, but really we have to be a model to women. Do not fear any of this. Have no fear. Know your own power. Be yourself. Go out there and fight the fight because you know your why. You know why you decided to get into the arena. You know what you care about. You know how to get a job done, and you can draw support from other people, and that's why they come after me. If I were not effective, they wouldn't take out 132,000 ads against me during the campaign. But we won a very decisive victory.
Many people in the Democratic Party are running for president.
Yeah.
You probably know all of them.
Yes.
And you never considered running for president, is that correct? You never considered, or did you?
No.
No.
I didn't consider running for Congress.
So about these people, many of them have positions that are being criticized.
That doesn't mean that people haven't suggested it, but anyway.
Okay. So I assume they come by and ask you for your advice and so forth. You're not going to support anybody before the nominee is selected by the party? Will you endorse anybody before the party actually picks somebody?
And it's not my intention at this time, but let me just endorse all of them by saying that they bring such values, such strategic thinking, such optimism and confidence about what they believe in to the discussion. So when they talk about maybe we have 10, 20 candidates and 2 debates on the stage, it'll be one display after another of American values, about concern for working families in our country, about plans to get results for those families. So I look forward to those debates. But I do think don't tell anybody I told you this, okay? I do think that the persons who will emerge will be those who connect. Remember I said vision, knowledge, and judgment, strategic thinking, plans, but who connects? Mr. Gordon and I had this conversation the other night. Who connects with the American people? And that is and that's up to the public. It's not up to any electeds, it's up to the public to decide who they respond to.
Some of the people running for president and some in your own caucus have supported something called the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that?
I am very pleased that there's an increased awareness about the threat to our planet, the crisis that we are facing. When I was Speaker the first time, that was my flagship issue under President Bush. We established a select committee. Ed Markey was the chair. Working with President Bush, passed an energy bill, the biggest energy bill in the history of our country, the equivalent of taking millions of cars off the road by raising the emission standards, establishing authorities later used by President Obama to honor the Paris Accords and the rest. This is a challenge to the generation in its many age manifestations. And when I said earlier, we have the challenge of reducing income disparity in our country. That's one challenge. Over here is the saving the planet. There's no plan B. But they are related, because I do believe that as we save the planet, we can do so with jobs, good paying jobs, keeping us preeminent in the world in the green technologies. It's a public health issue, clean air, clean water. It's a national security issue, which is one place I have a major disagreement with the current President of the United States. But the generals and admirals and others and security experts tell us that this is a security issue, and it's a moral issue if you believe, as I do, that this is God's creation. Many evangelicals and people of faith believe this is God's creation. We have a moral responsibility, good stewards. But if you don't share that religious belief, you do understand that we have a moral responsibility to pass the planet on to future generations. Now, we have formed another select committee which will review many options to see, based on evidence, data, facts, what the current situation is beyond when we were doing this with Mr. Markey and have continued to study since then. The Green New Deal, some of the elements of that may be part of will certainly be part of the discussion. But already, see, this time, different from before, this time I just didn't have a select committee as I did before. I've said to every chairman, saving the planet is an imperative for every committee in the House. So we've already had 15 hearings on climate when we really haven't had any for a number of years in the previous leadership. So this is, so that will be, some of the considerations will be some of the considerations as we go forward. What does the best job that keeps us number one, protects the children's health, secures our nation, honors our values, and does so in a way that gets results in a shorter period of time.
Some of the people running for president and some of your caucus have supported higher marginal tax rates, wealth taxes, and higher estate taxes. Do you have any views on whether those are likely to happen in this Congress or not?
Do you?
Well, I would say your view would be more important than mine. But,
well, let me go back to your previous question about the tax bill. I'll give you the same answer. The committee will be looking at what is it that we need in terms of revenue to meet the needs of the American people, to grow our economy in a way, and to recognize that certain things, like, for example, investment in education. Madam President McGuire, so some people in the Congress will say, well, we've got to freeze the Pell Grants and we've got to cut this or that because we've got to save money and reduce the national debt. But let me say this discourteously. With stiff competition, that is one of the dumbest ideas that our opponents have put forth, because nothing brings more money to the Treasury than the education of the American people. So when people say this tax credit's going to do this or that, let's talk about how we gear it all to education, education, education. It's the key to everything. And again, investments there reduce the deficit, right. And they do so in a way that is much better than some of the proposals right. that have been.
President Trump and his administration negotiated a revised NAFTA agreement known as USMCA, but it has to be approved by the Congress before it goes into effect. Do you think the House of Representatives will approve that deal?
We have to see it first. I voted for the original NAFTA. I took a lot of heat for doing it, and I had some disappointments that didn't live up to certain aspects of it. But our trade within our hemisphere, especially just now talking about Mexico, Canada, and the United States, is very important. I just spent I was in 5 cities in Texas within that past week, and they're very eager to know the answer to that question. Are we going to get a bill that we can support? When the president says, unless you get this new deal, we're canceling the old one, that's not a good idea. That's not a good idea. So there are 4 things that we have to make a judgment about. One, what are the environmental the environment is important. The workers' rights in both countries, that's important. And members are concerned about how pharmaceuticals are treating in those 3 things. But whatever is agreed to in those 3 areas, the most important element of a trade agreement is enforcement. If you don't have enforcement, you ain't got nothing, because it's just a conversation, or it's just a list of things. And so what I keep saying to Ambassador Lighthizer, who is really very respectful, he has listened to members on both sides of the aisle, and he is highly respected. The president's, that would be a good person. That we have to see the enforcement be central to the trade agreement, not peripheral to it. So we'll just see how it goes. He's having meetings with the members, and so members will weigh in on it. I thought this would be easy.
It is.
I meant the trade agreement. I don't.
Okay, the questions are not that hard. But okay, so when you were, Sally Burton was a good friend of yours.
Yeah.
And when she was on her deathbed, she asked you to run for Congress, yes. As I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Had you ever thought of running for Congress yourself? And
no.
what did your children say when you said you were going to run for Congress? Did they, and your husband?
Well, here's the thing. I never had no interest in our family in Baltimore, Maryland, as you mentioned. When I was born, my father was in Congress, a member from Baltimore. When I was in 1st grade, he became the mayor of Baltimore. When I was at Trinity College, he was still the mayor of Baltimore. It was the only life that we knew. And it was about, we were born into a family that was devoutly Catholic, fiercely patriotic, in love with America, proud of our Italian-American heritage, staunchly democratic. And that connection between our faith and how we exercised our belief in the Gospel of Matthew when I was hungry, or how we just treated people with a spark of divinity, each of them having worthy of respect. We're all God's children. That's how we were raised, to have responsibility to other people. And that's what our parents instilled in us. But I never, ever thought, nor did anybody else around me think, that I would ever want to run for office. However, I did volunteer in the Democratic Party to support other candidates. When Paul and I first moved to California, one of the first people that we ever met was Leo Daley. How many years? Decades ago, Leo. Thank you, and Gregor, for being here today. I knew Leo before I was even a volunteer in politics, right? I mean, that was even pre that. But then one thing and another. Since it's International Women's Day, I'll tell you this. When Mayor Alioto called, my kids and I, we used to go to the library and, sort books, do all the things that you do as a volunteer. So the mayor called me one day and he said, I know you love the library. I want to point you to the Library Commission. As you said, I said, oh, Mr. Mayor, you don't have to do that. Save that for somebody else. We'll always volunteer. We love the library. He said, Nancy, now he wasn't known as a feminist, Mayor Alioto, but he said this. He said, Nancy, If you're doing the work, get official recognition for it. You become a member of this commission, you have a vote, you make decision, people care about what you think. And so I did that. And then today we're celebrating libraries in San Francisco. We became the National Library of the Year. I'm so proud of that. So I'm still close to the library. But the point being, for other women, get the recognition for what you are doing, because you never know, as I never knew that Sala would want me to run for office. But when she did, I was ready. So I say to people, know your power. Women, know your power. Count everything you've done, including being a mom, maybe starting with. Know your power. Be yourself. Authenticity is everything. Sincerity and authenticity is everything. Don't try to be somebody. Be yourself and be ready.
You got elected.
Be ready.
You got elected.
Yeah.
You had 3 children living in Washington then, and you said to them, as I understand it, well, we can now all live together in a house. We get the 3 children and...
Yeah, they were at Georgetown, yeah.
What did your children say about that idea?
They said, Mother, well, first let me just say this. So Sala says to me, you have to make me feel better if you would run. And I said, Sala, I have never even thought about running for office. I'm shy, you know? So, so I said, go home and talk to my kid. So I only have one at home, Alexandra. She's a filmmaker. You probably know Alexandra Pelosi. Anyway, she was 16. She was going to be a senior in high school, young for her age, a senior in high school. I said, Alexandra, Mommy has the opportunity to run for Congress. I don't know if I will win. I just have the opportunity to run for Congress. I love my life. I love being here with you. So if you want me to stay for this it would be easier if you were one more year in college, but if you want me to be here, otherwise I'll be going like 3 nights a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the week. So any answer is fine. I honestly mean that. Yes, no, I'm happy either way. Mother, so I knew I was in trouble right then and there. Mother, get a life. Well, this was 30 years ago. I had never heard the expression before. Get a life. What teenage girl would not want her mother gone 3 nights a week? So then when I go to Washington, Dad says, you know, we're going to have a nice house. I'm looking at the kids thinking hot meals, clean clothes, your own room. They're living in basements and attics. Heaven on earth to them, but not to me. I said, we can all live together and this or that. They're like, Mother, we love our siblings. Not only do we not want to live with you, we don't want to live with each other. We're in college to live with our friends. So you're in Congress, we're in college. Why don't you just forget we're in the same city? Boo-hoo.
But it must have been a thrill for your father and mother were still alive when you were elected. They came to see you sworn in, is that right?
Yeah. My father had been a member of Congress, so as a member of Congress, you have the rights. Tom McMillan is here, he knows this. We came in the same class. That you have Mr. Bart Gordon knows this as well. You have, if you're a former member of Congress, you have rights to the floor. So my father was on the floor of the House when I was sworn in. That was pretty exciting. That was pretty exciting. And then he died a few months later. I was so lucky that he was there to see that, and my mother was too.
You obviously enjoy the job. How many more years might you do this? 10, 15, 20? Any limit?
You think that I'm going to... I know that there's... Jerry Brown said this to me recently. He said there's nothing as limiting, nothing as liberating as term limits. You just do what you do. No,
so you might do
I'm
this.
on a mission. I'm not on a timetable, but I do have some other things I want to do in life.
The proudest achievement you have legislatively, would that be the Affordable Care Act that you kind of shepherded through the House? Is that
yes, the Affordable Care Act, David. This is like a pillar. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act. not only 20 million more people having access to health care, which we're very proud of, but everybody in our country getting better benefits, whether it's no pre-existing condition limitation on access, or ending caps, annual caps or lifetime caps, being a woman, no longer a pre-existing medical condition. I can tell you that as a mother of 5 in 6 years, almost to the day, that is considered, I thought it was a sign of strength. They considered it a pre-existing medical condition. If your kids up until 25 years old, they can be. So it wasn't just about the new people getting health care. It was about the increased benefits for other people. And the idea was we would always keep increasing it. Now our goal is to make sure that all Americans have access to quality, affordable health care. There are many proposals that you're probably going to ask me about right now on the table. You're just agnostic. What are those? What do they mean in terms of quality of care for the individual, cost to the individual, and to the country?
So, are there any other Pelosi's who might run for office? Are any of your children interested in office?
No, my one daughter, Christine, is the smartest political person that I know, but she doesn't show, and she has a 9-year-old little girl, and that's hard. I mean, I have the highest respect for my women colleagues who come, who are simultaneously raising families and serving in Congress. I'm in total awe of them. They're so fabulous. Mine was sequential. Christine doesn't show any interest in running for public office, but she is involved civically, again, following in her grandmother's guidances of our responsibilities to other people in our community.
Can you say something about your husband? What's it like to be married to the Speaker of the House for your husband, and has it made it easier for you to do it the way he's operated?
Well, let me just say, you have to ask him that. What is it like for him to be married to the Speaker of the House? However, he does it from time to time say, this isn't what I bargained for. Right. Or, how did this happen? You know, because here we were, you know, just getting married happily, having our children and the rest, and then boom, all of a sudden, one thing and another.
So, final question, what would you like American people to know about Nancy Pelosi? In 20 seconds or so, what would you like people to say, this is what they should know about Nancy Pelosi? She's interested in this, she wants to do this. What would you like to have people take away from this conversation?
Well, my why, in terms of why I went from the kitchen to the Congress, from housewife to House Speaker, my why is the 1 in 5 children in America who lives in poverty. Having 5 children of my own, knowing the love and concern and all that we give to our children, probably everyone in this room, that we can afford personally, time-wise and otherwise for our children. To me, it's a disservice to every child in America to not be sure that every child in America has the opportunity. That 1 in 5 children in America goes to sleep hungry at night is like, this is the greatest country that ever existed in the history of the world, and 1 in 5 children goes to sleep hungry enough. So that is my why. I couple that with just instilled in me by my parents a love of our country that just says anything is possible in America. Anything is possible. So it gives you hope that if you work hard enough, pray hard enough too, that you'll be able to accomplish whatever the goal is. And I just leave you with the thought that this country is the greatest country that ever was. It can withstand anything, but we all have a responsibility. This is a moment, as Elijah Cummings said at the close of his hearings, this is our destiny. Thomas Paine said, the times have found us. The times have found us now too, to channel the energies, respect the diversity, the differences of opinion in our country, and always keep taking it back to the oneness, e pluribus unum. So what I want them to know about me is that the reason I left home, the reason I get up every morning to go into the fight is the 1 in 5 children who live in poverty.
I'd like to thank you for a very interesting conversation, for making so many I'd like to thank you for making so many Americans, so many women, so many people from San Francisco and the hometown of Baltimore proud. And I have a small gift for you.
Let us hear it for David. Isn't David a wonderful interviewer?
This is a picture when you were taking the gavel the first time and taking the gavel the second time. They look exactly the same. And thank you very much.
No fair.
Thank you very much for a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.